Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're going on a totally mind-bending journey into a 400-year-old architectural mystery. This is a story where geography, memory, and reality itself are literally fluid. We're looking at a single, completely impossible building and the one family destined to map the whole thing out. Honestly, by the end of this, you're probably going to find yourself questioning the very nature of your own reality.
Okay, let's dive into this. The Vespucio family lived on Calle de los Suspiros, but their home wasn't, normal bricks and mortar. The famous saying goes, the house is not one house, it is many houses, layered atop one another like pages in a book. It literally overwrites itself, kind of like drafts of a novel, completely rearranging its corridors and concealing or revealing rooms depending entirely on when and how you happen to look at it.
Part 1. The House of Shifting Memories. 400 years on Calle de los Suspiros.
So, to even begin mapping this impossible space, the early Vespucio cartographers, specifically a guy named Heraclito and his son Aurelio, had to figure out its bizarre physical rules. They used this highly specific ink made from actual dream sediment. Why? Because the house observes what they called a temporal Sabbath. It only happens on Tuesdays. The grandfather clock in the foyer stops dead at exactly 3:47 p.m., and then the house just holds its breath for exactly 17 minutes. During that tiny, highly specific window, hidden doors to other versions of the house finally reveal themselves.
Well, during one of those 17-minute intermissions, Aurelio made a massive breakthrough. He discovered what he called the seventh corridor. But the crazy thing is, he realized this wasn't a physical hallway at all. It was more like a spine. If the house was a book, this corridor was the white space where one story ends and another begins. It's the pause that makes the whole narrative possible. It's the binding holding all these conflicting versions of the house together simultaneously, so they don't just collapse into a total paradox.
Part 2. The Library and the Book. Translating the Impossible.
And this brilliantly illustrates how the burden shifts once you realize the house is essentially a book. The rules completely flip. You move from mapping physical space to mapping time itself, and that burden was handed off across the generations. Aurelio mapped the space back in 1923, but upon his death, his daughter Soledad inherits the task of mapping time. Then, 37 years later, a stranger arrives carrying a mysterious book. Jump another 17 years, and a translator named Isolde basically becomes a living corridor, which all leads up to a young boy, Teodoro, who will witness the final gathering during an eclipse.
Soledad's real journey starts when she steps through this impossible paper door and enters the Library of Arrivals. Now, this isn't just a room with shelves. It's a condition of the house. It contains every single book that has ever entered the building, including, incredibly, books from centuries in the future. And the moment she walks in, the room literally metabolizes her arrival. The door she just used completely ceases to exist, and she is stranded entirely outside of conventional time.
And while she's trapped in this timeless library, Soledad uncovers her father's dying realization, which translates directly into her mind. He said, "The question is not what we forget when we remember. The question is what we remember when we forget." Wow, right? He realized that forgetting isn't just deleting data. It's a completely different form of architecture. The house wasn't built to hide things. It was constructed to give a physical shape to human amnesia.
Part 3. Building the Distributed Mind, a 400-year cognitive architecture. Now, what's really interesting about this is how it juxtaposes the core philosophical paradox of the story. As the era of the translator Isolde and the nameless stranger begins, the house finally reveals its hand. See, remembering isn't just opening up a fixed file in your brain, it's actively generating the past and the present. And forgetting is actively removing something from that generative process. They're partners. And the absolute miracle of the house on Calle de los Suspiros is that it manages to hold both of those impossible truths at the exact same time.
To actually spread this paradox, the house uses a vessel. A stranger arrives carrying this book he's been following around for 37 years. Soledad writes the house's truth into it, but, and here is the kicker, it isn't a static text. As the quote says, the book is not a container for a single meaning, it is a generator of meanings. When the stranger takes it back out into the real world, the text translates itself and changes completely based entirely on who happens to be reading it.
Which leads us to this incredible cosmic twist. Isolde, the translator, has this dream where she is a corridor, and she discovers she's actually a conduit. Through her, we learn the real terrifying truth. The house isn't just asking one question, it is asking millions of them. Every single person on Earth who reads a version of that shifting book becomes a listener, acting as an individual neuron.
That's right, over 400 years. The house has secretly been using its readers to build a massive distributed mind capable of asking a universe-altering question.
Part 4. The Final Eclipse. The Unaskable Question.
So this massive distributed mind is finally nearing completion, and it all happens under the watch of the final cartographer, young Teodoro. You have to look at the terrifying speed of the house's rearrangements here. For centuries, it shifted super slowly, but as this impending lunar eclipse approaches, which is the absolute deadline for the distributed mind, the house just starts accelerating. It rearranges weekly, then daily, then hourly. All the layers violently collapse toward one single final geometric configuration.
And as that eclipse draws closer, this massive decentralized mind has to become local. Thousands of readers from all over the globe, all holding their own unique versions of the book, are inexplicably pulled toward Calle de los Suspios. They pour through the front doors, and the house impossibly expands its main chamber, physically arranging every single person into these mesmerizing, massive concentric rings. To put that into perspective, the scale of this gathering is just breathtaking. Every single person who ever engaged with the house is there. The cartographers who mapped it, the listeners who translated it, the stranger who carried the book, and the thousands of everyday readers. They aren't individuals anymore. They have all become vital, synchronized neurons in a localized brain that this house literally spent 4 centuries building.
So thousands of people are standing there in absolute pin-drop silence. The light in the room shifts and layers as the lunar eclipse completely covers the sun. And then, just as it has for centuries, but for the very last time, at exactly 3:47, the grandfather clock in the foyer stopped, and the house held its breath. The suspense is just immense. The moment stretches out infinitely, and right in the center of that gathered mind, the ultimate, unaskable question finally materializes.
The house spent 400 years building a mind large enough just to ask this single thing. If remembering creates reality, what are you bringing into existence right now? Take a second to really sit with that. If every memory is actually an act of generation, if what you focus on literally builds the architecture of your world, what reality are you choosing to construct at this very second?